Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. Well, we got another episode, another update of Through the Gates, the Save the Hunt. And, the last several weeks we've been talking about things on the legislative side and on the commission side, and There's a lot of questions or maybe curiosity about some of the things that we talk about and maybe what people hear on the landscape. And one thing it's not a fallacy or a falsehood. We just wanted to maybe bring some light to some of the conversation about the North American model of wildlife conservation. We adhere to that. And for that matter, the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, the mission is to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's it. We're not a membership organization. It's to define a cause and to be able to support that cause that all wildlife in North America has been managed by for the course of essentially the last 125 plus years. We're going to dive a little bit into it because we're going to have some future guests on and some future episodes pertaining to the North American model. But why it's so important right now is because during these general legislative sessions, during these sessions when commissions are making decisions based upon facts and data and science, the North American model is a key component of those conversations. And it's worth noting that without that model, without something to be able to hold up and prop up, it would be hard for those game agencies to be able to say that we support this from a state, a regional, or a federal level, or even out of Canada from a North American model. The North American model, explained in a sense, is 7 tenets, 7 principles, 7 pillars that all game agencies adhere to in some form or fashion. Now, it's worth noting that anti-hunting extremists, the animal activist extremists, would prefer not to have the model because it's perfect. Now, it might need some adaptations. It might have some modifications that are necessary because of changing principles or the guiding light, the way demographics and geographics change. But as a whole, it's worth noting that the extremists, have not come up with anything to replace it. They just want to get rid of it because it doesn't go along with their beliefs. Shane Mahoney, with Conservation Visions. And Shane also started the Wild Harvest Initiative. Shane and I become friends over the course of the last several years. We first met back in 2022, and I saw him here at the Wild Sheep Foundation show in Reno not too long ago. But Shane, for those of you who don't know, is probably one of the most well-spoken, knowledgeable, passionate, thoughtfully minded individuals that you could ever come across when it comes to science-based wildlife management and being able to sustain our conservation efforts throughout the world, not just in North America. I would encourage each and every one of you to look up Shane through Conservation Visions. And he, along with Dr. Valerius Geist, wrote the book, The North American Model of Wildlife Conservation. And they kind of set the standard as to what that was going to entail and how to define it and how to justify it and substantiate it. And while we can't do it in this particular short update episode, bringing it up to let you, the viewer, the listener, do some research on your own to find out what is this model? What are the pillars of the model? How does this go along with what I would like to see my elected officials and my commission leaders maybe be able to turn around and support? We've gotten to a point to where we've had to defend the model on so many different occasions that we've sometimes to nausea. And if you look at what we've built through the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, being able to educate about specific pillars of the model and how that applies to the model just doesn't work for hunters, and it doesn't just work for game managers. It works for the benefit of wildlife management and resources. And the first pillar is of the 7 pillars is wildlife is a public resource and held in public trust. Now, in the United States, wildlife is considered a public resource independent of the land or water where wildlife may live. Government at various levels have a role in managing that resource on behalf of all citizens and to ensure the long-term sustainability of wildlife populations. You could tell that's probably a whole episode for us or anybody else. And while people have gotten into the description of the model or the definition of the model, being able to try to decipher that, how that might play into a legislative decision or a commission decision, those are the hardest things to be able to try to get people that aren't educated and don't understand the basis of the model and the pillars and the way that science-based wildlife management has actually evolved over the course of the last 100-plus years. The Boone and Crockett Club, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and a plethora of other organizations have propped up this model for the reason of continuity and sustainability, to make sure that not so much that we're lockstep with everything, but that we actually have a basis on what our principles are established and why we want to continue to do what we do. Number 2 on there is markets for game have been eliminated, and this is a controversial subject because government actions making it illegal to buy and sell meat and parts of game and non-game species have removed a huge threat to the survival of those species, and a market in fur bearers continues as a highly regulated activity. Because I'm a trapper, because I'm a fur harvester, currently I'm still the president for the Colorado Trappers and Predator Hunters Association, we've had to argue this point because the antis continually come back and say, you are in direct contrast, contrary to the North American model, because you harvest fur. You commercialize fur. There's an exemption in this, and the reason being is because they're fur-bearing animals. And if you look at the legitimate use side of the model, it actually gets into the explanation of why fur-bearer harvest is actually legal if it's regulated, and it's proven to benefit the species under those fur bearer classifications. And like in Colorado, we've got 17 fur bearer that are classified under that designation. Some states have 10, some states have 20, but for the grand scheme of things, it's all of what we do at all single levels to make sure that we've got all of it combined for that market component of the pillar. If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50-plus years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to salidagunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com. The allocation of wildlife by law. Wildlife is a public resource managed by government, and as a result, access to wildlife for hunting is through legal mechanisms such as hunting seasons, bag limits, license requirements, etc. Taking into consideration that while we all might gripe and moan and groan and complain at different levels about our game agencies because they didn't give us what we want or we didn't understand what they were trying to do, we have to have somebody set there, and the allocation of law goes into the game management agencies, whether it's federal, state, or even out of the country. Wildlife can only be killed for a legitimate purpose, and that goes into the concept of what I mentioned about the fur bearers. Wildlife is a shared resource that must not be wasted, and this law prohibits killing wildlife for frivolous reasons. Meat, management, and fur are not for frivolous reasons. Those are components of the model that I adhere to, and every sportsman that I know adheres to, and you're going to get offshoots of individuals, but for the most part, management of wildlife is a proven history. It's an opportunity for wildlife managers to incorporate the public concerns, whether they're hunters or non-hunters, but hunters as a whole turn around and really sustain and adhere to those principles. Wildlife species are considered an international resource, and if you know anything about the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and CITES, Some species, such as migratory birds, cross national boundaries, and treaties such as the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and CITES recognize the shared responsibility to manage these species across national boundaries. You get into the wildlife that goes from Alaska to Canada to the United States and down into Mexico and South America. They have protections, and they're done for a reason, looking at the holistic and organic approach to be able to manage that wildlife accordingly and not take any one specific species and elevate it or pedestalize it above another. The sixth pillar is a science is a proper tool for discharge of wildlife policy. And that means in order to manage wildlife as a shared resource fairly, objectively, and knowledgeably, decisions must be based upon sound science, such as annual waterfowl population surveys and the work of professional wildlife biologists, like what we saw here that was exhibited on Proposition 127 on the Bobcat and Mountain Lion ballot initiative that happened in 2024. Scientists manage our wildlife. Not extremists, not voters, not politicians, but scientists. The seventh and final pillar is the democracy of hunting and fishing, and in keeping with democratic principles, government allocates access to wildlife without regard for wealth, prestige, and land ownership. Somebody might own the property, but they don't own the animals that are on that property. That's managed by the state. That's managed by the federal government, depending on if it falls under the federal confines of things. These are things that people need to be aware of when we're talking about referencing the North American model. And over the course of the next several months, you're going to see guests on Through the Gates to Save the Hunt that can explain this more in depth from a science-based perspective, but also from a perspective of being able to turn around and utilize this as an information tool to where when you talk to your friends or your neighbors or your congregation, or your business partners, or your family, you can start to prop up the model, because without that model to be propped up, we have nothing when it comes to the public resource explanation of why we hunt and why we need to manage game animals. For more information, go to SaveTheHuntColorado.com, and we look forward to giving you more information down the road. But look up the North American model of wildlife conservation. Look up Shane Mahoney. Look up the late Valerius Geist and see what they did for conservation efforts, not just in Colorado, not just in the West, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Follow us and subscribe on any of the platforms that you're looking at. Give us a 5-star rating, and we hope that you're finding these updates valuable in how you can help to save the hunt.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.